Good morning. Welcome to the 21st Annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Virtual Breakfast Celebration. My name is David Gomes, and I'm the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth Chief Diversity Officer. This morning, I have the privilege and honor of serving as your co-host, along with F.A. Obo Idahosa, one of our preeminent student leaders on campus. F.A., a member of the class of 2023, is a political science major with minors in Black Studies, Legal Studies, and Urban Studies. She's the current president of the Student Government Association, president and founder for Chance for Change, president of Speak, and a student supervisor at the university's Writing and Multiliteracy Center. Another interesting factoid about this up-and-coming future attorney is that F.A. also served as an intern in the office of Massachusetts Senator Elizabeth Warren. I am definitely in esteemed company this morning and honored to be in the presence of such an exceptional student leader. To open our formal program, I'd like to introduce our musical guest, Shane Burgo. Shane is a lifelong resident of New Bedford who has served our community through active participation in social, economic, and racial justice organizations, all in the name of equity, opportunity, dignity, and progress. As a testament to his commitment to community service, Shane is a member of the executive committee of the New Bedford branch of the National Association for the Advancement of Colored People, the NAACP, and also serves as a member of the Coalition of Social Justice. In addition to his participation as a member of United Interfaith Action of Southeastern Massachusetts, Shane is engaged in missionary work in Haiti and actively serves as a member of the Parish Council at New Bedford's Our Lady of the Assumption Church, the first Catholic Cape Verdean church in the Americas, where he also sings in the church choir. An alum of UMass Dartmouth's Upward Bound program, Shane was recently elected as Counselor at Large for the City of New Bedford and serves as chairman of the Affordable Housing and Homeless Affairs Committee. Please welcome Shane Burgo as he opens our program with our first musical selection, Lift Every Voice and Sing, song designated by the NAACP as the Black National Anthem. Traditionally, it's customary to stand for the singing of the Black National Anthem if you are able to do so.
Lift every voice and sing till earth and heaven ring, ring with the harmonies of liberty. Let our rejoicing rise high as the listening skies. Let it resound loud as the rolling sea. Sing a song full of the faith that the dark past has taught us. Sing a song full of the hope that the present has brought us. Facing the rising sun of our new day begun. Let us march on till victory is won. Stony the road we trod, bitter the chastening rod, felt in the day that hope unborn had died, yet with a steady beat have not our weary feet come to the place on which our Father sighed. We have come over a way that with tears have been watered. We have come treading our path through the blood of the slaughtered. Out from the gloomy past, till now we stand at last, where the white gleam of our bright star is cast. God of our weary years, God of our silent tears, thou who has brought us thus far on the way, thou who has by thy might led us into the light, keep us forever in the path, we pray. Lest our feet stray from the places, our God, where we met thee, lest our hearts, drunk with the wine of the world, we forget thee. Shadowed beneath thy hand, may we forever stand, true to our God, true to our native land.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you, Shane, for that beautiful performance. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Efe Obo-Adahosa. On behalf of Chancellor Mark Fowler, the faculty, staff, and students of UMass Dartmouth, I would like to welcome you to the 21st Annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Virtual Breakfast Celebration. This year's theme of our breakfast celebration is Together We Can See the Dream. 2023 would have marked the 94th birthday of Dr. King, who championed nonviolent resistance, social justice, and activism during our country's tumultuous civil rights movement of the 1950s and 1960s. While Dr. King's strategy of nonviolent disobedience and interracial cooperation forever changed our country's landscape by moving the pendulum away from legalized segregation and discrimination, his work still remains unfinished. As many fundamental rights held sacred by Americans from all walks of life are under constant threat of being dismantled, it is still Dr. King's example of unified collaboration, cooperation, and tenacious advocacy that his dream of equal rights and justice for all will be achieved. Together we can be the dream. At this time, I'd like to invite you to watch a short video commemorating Dr. King's legacy.
Green Sally up, a green Sally down, last done start, gotta tell the ground. Green Sally up, a green Sally down, last done start, gotta tell the ground.
If you can accept it, you will leave those state troopers glutted with their own barbarity. If you can accept it, you will do something that will transform conditions here in Alabama.
Sally up, a green Sally down, last done start, gotta tell the ground.
So I'm not worried this afternoon, however dark it may be. This nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. That is another part of that great statement, yet that scaffold sways the future. It's the strong who can stand up amid opposition, who can stand up amid violence being inflicted upon him and not retaliate with violence. I will not rest until we are able to make this kind of witness in this city so that the power structure downtown will have to say, we can't stop this movement, and the only way to deal with it is to give these people what we owe them and what their God-given rights and their constitutional rights demand. Abused and scorned though we may be, our destiny is tied up with the destiny of America.
The violence that Birmingham represented, people knew could easily be turned and focused on King as a representative of the movement. So he was dealing with a decision that had to do with his own life.
I would hope that the FBI would come out and say something that I think is much more significant, and that is that it is amazing that so few Negroes have turned to communism in the light of that desperate plight. I think it is one of the amazing developments of the 20th century, how loyal the Negro has remained to America in spite of his long night of oppression and discrimination.
This Civil Rights Act is a challenge to all of us to go to work in our communities and our states, in our homes and in our hearts, to eliminate the last vestiges of injustice in our beloved country.
As we walked into the White House that day, into the East Room, we were just thinking, you know, this day will fulfill the aspirations of millions of our people over more than 100 years who had longed that one day the government would say, it's not right, stop it. So it was a watershed moment. And every time I look at that picture of the smile on Dr. King's face and the amazement in my own thoughts of being there, it was a great day.
We've got some difficult days ahead, but it really doesn't matter with me now because I've been to the mountaintop. I don't mind. Like anybody, I would like to live a long life. Longevity has its place, but I'm not concerned about that now. I just want to do God's will. And He's allowed me to go up to the mountain. And I've looked over and I've seen the promised land. I may not get there with you, but I want you to know tonight that we as a people will get to the promised land. Tonight, I'm not worried about anything. I'm not fearing any man. Mine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord.
Now I'd like to introduce the Chancellor of the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, Dr. Mark A. Fuller. Chancellor Fuller is a first-generation college student and passionate advocate for public higher education and for our students. He was appointed the 6th Chancellor of UMass Dartmouth on August 9th, 2021. Please join me in welcoming Chancellor Mark Fuller.
Can I be heard? I just had a little bit of an audio glitch on my computer. Hello?
Yes.
You're good, Chancellor.
David, can you hear me? I'm sorry.
Yes, sir.
Hello? All right, great. Thank you for that introduction, David, and for all the work you're doing to build a more inclusive UMass Dartmouth community. Thanks as well to you and everyone who has helped put this fantastic event together. Good morning and welcome to everyone joining us today. I'm going to keep my comments brief because the voices that should take center stage today are those of our amazing students, as well as our distinguished guest speaker, Feminista Jones. I'm honored to be here today for an event, a celebration, and a conversation that feels more timely and important than ever. Speaking at Stanford University in 1967, Dr. King reminded us that we must come to see social progress never rolls in on the wheels of inevitability. It comes through the tireless efforts and the persistent work of dedicated individuals. Our students embody that work and the desire to fuel the change that Dr. King continues to inspire today. Our students donate more than 200,000 hours of service to our community each year. They fight for social justice and against systemic racism. They advocate for one another and give voice to their peers whose perspectives have been overlooked and silenced. They campaign to register voters and to encourage strong voter turnout on our campus. I'm inspired by them, and they give me what Dr. King sometimes called audacious faith in the future. Thank you all again for being here this morning. A warm welcome and thank you to Feminista Jones for joining us this morning, and a thank you especially to our incredible student community for paying daily tribute to MLK's legacy through your service and activism. Thank you.
Thank you, Chancellor Fuller, for your inspirational remarks. For our next musical performance, I am very excited to introduce our very own D. Sword Gospel Choir. D. Sword, which was established 17 years ago on the UMass Dartmouth campus, ministers through gospel music to penetrate the hearts, minds, and souls of its audience. Please join me in welcoming D. Sword Gospel Choir, accompanied by a unique sound band, as they perform Live Through It, a song written and composed by James Fortune and FYA.
Life is filled with so many ups and downs. Have you ever been there? One day you're smiling, the next day you're fighting to hold back your tears, to hide how you feel. So tired of faking like everything is okay when you know it's not right. No sleep at night. You may be not the end of the world. God already knew everyone who will leave you is better this way. Don't beg them to stay. You didn't see it coming, and now you feel broken. How can this be God? This cannot be God. I can only tell you what He told me. Live through it, grow through it, get through it. You can make it if you just break through it. Don't let this be the end for you. So live through it. I know you're staying down. There's no way I can live through this. But live through it. No one can understand all that you have been dealing with. Dying inside the fight of your life, but I know, and He's there, and you win. Live through it, grow through it, get through it. You can live through it. You can live through it. It's working for your good. You can live through it. You can live through it. It's working for your good. You can live through it. You can live through it. It's working for your good. Sing it's working for your good. It's working for your good. Sing you're good, you're good, you're good, you're good. It's working for my good. Sing my good, my good, my good, my good. No, this will not be the end for you. So live through it.
Thank you, Dee Sword, for that beautiful rendition of Live Through It. At this time, I'd like to welcome our keynote speaker, Feminista Jones. Ms. Jones is the author of the critically acclaimed Reclaiming Our Space: How Black Feminists Are Changing the World from the Tweets to the Streets. Her work centers around diversity, equity, and inclusion, critical race theory, intersectionality, mental health, queer identity, and social work. She teaches courses on race, gender, LGBTQ experience at Temple University. Jones' passion and writing talent have led her to being featured in the New York Times, Washington Post, Time, Essence, Out, Complex, the Philadelphia Inquirer, Salon, and Ebony. She operates a subscription-based platform and contributes to various publications as a freelancer and commissioned writer. She's also been featured on the Oprah Winfrey Network. In 2019, Jones joined two of her closest friends to create Black Girl Missing, a true crime podcast that focuses on the stories of missing African-American girls in the United States. Jones is also a mom, an organizational leadership, management, culture, and diversity consultant, a mentor to young girls and women, a PhD student at Temple University, and an outspoken advocate for the homeless people living in poverty and those living with psychiatric disabilities. Please join me in welcoming Feminista Jones.
Thank you so much. Good morning, everyone. I am so honored to be here. I know that I don't have a lot of time because if you ever heard me talk, you know I can talk forever and ever and ever, especially when I'm talking about Dr. Martin Luther, the King. I love to come into spaces and share my perspectives on Dr. King because they are not what you usually hear, right? And that's probably one of the biggest issues. And one of the things that I think tarnishes his legacy the most is that people deny, in my opinion, the very best parts of him, which were his radicalism and his radical approach to changing the world. I think that what a lot of people forget or maybe take for granted is that the idea of someone affirming the humanity of African Americans and stating that we deserve to have equal rights was absolutely a radical position to take in the time that Dr. King was alive and fighting for freedom. To say that it's, we say that now, we say things like Black Lives Matter and, we're more accepting of these things, but at the time it made him a terrorist. It made him an enemy of the state because he was able to rally so many people behind him. So what I want to talk about briefly, and I know that we're going to do some questions and we'll be able to get more into that, is just some of the things that I think we can take away from Dr. King's work and his legacy and the things that I think, he really stood for. So usually I like to tell people, I like to start by reminding people that Dr. King was only 39 when he died. A lot of times they show black and white photos and he may seem like he was a lot older than he was. This was a 39-year-old man. And for perspective, I'll be 44 in April. This is a man who got started in his early 20s and devoted the entirety of his adult life to fighting for freedom. I like to remind college students especially of how young he was when he got started, because I like to remind them that most revolutionaries get started around your age and that you all are the future and you're what's next. So take that from Dr. King. He was a great orator, and I don't know how many of you know, but he would win speech contests when he was a teenager. And he went on to give over 2,500 speeches, okay? We only get to hear one, and that's the one, Normalcy Never Again, which people have dubbed I Have a Dream. He's given over 2,500 speeches, and people were able to listen and come and be moved by him because of his orator skills. Because he came up in the church tradition, he had to learn his cadence and things like that. So he's quite aspirational for me. Another thing that people don't usually know about him is that he didn't originally agree with the Montgomery bus boycott. I think it's important to bring that out because that speaks to who he was. He was a man who understood that if people boycotted the buses, it would have a detrimental impact on their ability to go to work, and they may lose their jobs, and they may lose their ability to bring money home to feed their families. So at first, he was against that. And I think that speaks to his compassion. And I think that speaks to his understanding. He eventually, obviously, got on board, but the fact that he considered that's something that we need to think about when we are organizing and when we are leading movements today. What is the material impact that these ideas and these plans we have, what effect is that going to have on the people that we're asking to show up? And should we be asking everyone to just drop everything and do that? Dr. King became increasingly radical, and I think it was due to the exposure to, as he started moving around to different spaces and started seeing what people were living in. I also think because he got arrested over 30 times. I don't know if any of you have ever been arrested, but it only took one time for me to realize that I never wanted to go through that again. And so I think that having gone through that over 30 times, I think Dr. King probably was radicalized through the abuses he endured, through the penal system in the United States. There were attacks on his life, threats to his life, tangible, fantasized, figurative. He was under constant surveillance. And I think that began to make him hypersensitive to the world that he was actually living in, and it increased his radicalism over time. I like to remind people that, Dr. King moved his family to Chicago because he was fighting for labor and housing rights at the end of his life when he was killed. And I think that that's important because we tend to tend to locate him in the South. And with that comes, some ideas and connotations of what we think, right? And unfortunately, we have been biased to think about, especially African Americans from the South as being less intelligent and slow and all these other things that have, that are really unfair. But Dr. King moved outside of the South, and his work was not only contained in fighting against Jim Crow and for racial justice in the South, he was also against the Vietnam War. He spoke a lot about being anti-capitalism, anti-militarism, and these were the things that really started catching the attention of the so-called powers that be. I think, and this is my opinion, I think that they were maybe willing to accept, eventually that, yeah, he's in the South down there fighting for those, those slurs or what have you, but we can keep him down there and contained. He's not really too much of a threat. But I think that when he started incorporating anti-militarism and anti-war, anti-capitalism ideas into his speeches and his talks and his interviews, I think there was, they became more concerned because they realized that he did have influence over people. And if he was moving into those other sectors, that might be a problem. So I like to kind of give that framing for Dr. King because unfortunately, his legacy gets watered down. And I think that is done intentionally. It's a disempowering move. It is a way of trying to erase, how deep an impact, how great an impact he had at the time, and to also not, to try to not have other people be inspired by his radicalism. They want to give him a fairy tale idea, and I think that that is rather detrimental. But here's some things that we have that I think we can pull from what he was doing. The first is to learn from the people that came before you. One of the things that people that may not know a lot about Dr. King is that he was such a scholar. This man started college at like 15 years old, and he was always studying people and their philosophies. We hear a lot about his, adopting nonviolence because of Gandhi. Well, what we don't hear about his Pan-Africanism that he adopted from W.E.B. Du Bois and Kwame Nkrumah in Ghana. We don't hear that he went to Ghana and studied over there with him. We don't hear that he traveled to Nigeria and was learning from leadership over there. We don't hear much about how he honored W.E.B. Du Bois and wrote about him and his inspiration for his Pan-Africanism. Now, why would we want to divorce Dr. King from Pan-Africanism? Because of the connotations and the negative stereotypes about what it means to be Pan-Africanist. But Dr. King's politics were informed by a global and international approach to racial liberation and cultural equality. And so that's important. So he studied Du Bois. And the way he spoke of Du Bois, he had given this talk at Dartmouth, and he was honoring him. And he said Du Bois's greatest virtue was his committed empathy with all the oppressed and his divine satisfaction with all forms of injustice. Today, we are still challenged to be dissatisfied. Let us be dissatisfied until every man can have food and material necessities for his body, culture, and education for his mind, freedom, and human dignity for his spirit. Excuse me. This was Dr. King speaking of Du Bois. I could be speaking this of Dr. King, right? And I think what we pull from this and what he pulled from Du Bois is that we can never be content with the way things are. As long as any of us are living under oppression or suffering, we must be dissatisfied with the status quo and we must fight. Another thing that we can pull from Dr. King's work is this idea that freedom is not free. From the speech, Normalcy Never Again, also known as I Have a Dream, Dr. King said, and there will be neither rest nor tranquility in America until the Negro is granted his citizenship rights. The whirlwinds of revolt will continue to shake the foundations of our nation until that bright day of justice emerges. That's not part of the speech that gets the refrain every January 15th, right? You hear the, I have a dream that, one day my children will hold hands with, what have you. They don't play this part. They don't repeat this part. And he's saying that we will not rest We will continue to fight. There will be revolt. There will be rebellion. There will be protest. There will be anger. There will be people who will continue to fight, and we will not be silent about this. And he knew, as somebody who had been incarcerated many times, he knew as somebody who had, attempts on his life made, that this is not something that comes easy and is without consequence, that we have to fight, and freedom is not going to be given to us. We have to fight it. He said, our only hope today lies in our ability to recapture the revolutionary spirit and go out into a sometimes hostile world, declaring eternal hostility on poverty, racism, and militarism. And when we fold that into his ideas of nonviolence, people were like, well, that doesn't sound like it's nonviolent. For him, it was, right? But he was speaking to the ideology that we have to embrace. We have to make sure, again, that we are completely dissatisfied with what's being given to us. Dr. King also wanted us to focus on the real enemy. And one of the issues I think that we are facing right now is there's a lot of infighting between people that are supposed to be on the same side. We have to remember what the real enemies are. Things like white supremacy, patriarchy and misogyny, queer phobia, ableism, ageism, fat phobia, all these things. You can say capitalism if you really want to go there, but we have to remember that the enemy is not the person that is necessarily sitting next to us. That person may be saying things that are harmful and things that could, have a detrimental impact on my life, but where do they learn that from? And so we have to punch up, and we have to be focused on the macro level issues and tear those down, so that way we can stop the perpetuation of ignorance and hatred and violence over generations. We have to get, together, and we have to remember this. He asked, he's like, why do white people seem to find it so difficult to understand that the Negro is sick and tired of having reluctantly parceled out to him those rights and privileges which all others receive upon birth or entry in America? Dr. King often asked these questions, right? And so, yes, we want to work together, and yes, we want to build coalitions, but we also need to make sure that people understand that we are sick and tired. After hundreds of years of living under tyranny and oppression, we are sick and tired, but we understand that the larger issue is those macro things, and we have to work together to fight against those things. Two more things. One, collaboration will always cover more ground. You will often see people pit Dr. King against Malcolm X, and I think that's one of the most tragic things to come out of that. Those men had the same goal, and they each recognized that in each other. They may not have always agreed on the tactics, but the both of them wanted liberation for their people. And what we understand is that there's, as they say, more way to skin something. I don't know. But there's more than one way to reach the same goal. And not everybody is going to have the same ideas and agree. But if we can agree that the collective response is we want liberation and we want freedom, then we can get there. And I think that for those of you that are interested in being activists and becoming activists, you have to remember that everybody's not going to agree with you. Not everybody's going to think about the same tactics that you have, but your goals have to be the same. And you have to be able to work together in some way, or at least respect and honor that you're both on the same path. And then finally, I think that Dr. King's, and this is what I tell young people all the time, you have to find your purpose. Being an activist is not just about performance or trying to be a part of the cool kids crowd and what they call woke or whatever. It's about having a purpose and a passion and being committed to doing this every day, like for the rest of your life, for as long as you live. This becomes a part of who you are. It's not just a thing you do on a Saturday when you have some extra time and you saw a Facebook event, right? Dr. King, he said, I question and soul search constantly into myself to be as certain as I can that I am fulfilling the true meaning of my work, that I am maintaining my sense of purpose, that I am holding fast to my ideals, that I'm guiding my people in the right direction. This is something that he, thought about all the time. You have to revisit your purpose, your passion. You have to kind of check yourself. Am I doing the right thing? Am I having the best impact? Am I taking care of myself? Being introspective has been a really super important part of my work and constantly revisiting these things. So I've definitely taken that from Dr. King. And to wrap up, I want, the biggest thing that I try to push and get people to think about is while we do these celebrations for Dr. King every year and we commemorate him and things like that, most of us don't know much about Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. And that's not to be shady or an indictment. It's an encouragement to learn more. Read his books. The man has written several books. Read his essays. Listen to him in the recordings of his interviews at different places. Read his speeches. The man was a great speechwriter and essayist. Read them. Most people have not read them. I want you to start reading Dr. King's books. I want you to learn about him from his own words. So I encourage you all to go and educate yourself more about who Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. really was. And let's not rely on the sound bites that we get every year. Okay, thank you so much.
Ms. Jones. Thank you so much for joining us this morning, and thank you for those powerful remarks. So my co-host Effie and I like to now engage in a moderated question and answer session with you. So I have the honor of posing the first question. Talked a lot about activism. So was there a significant event in your life that ignited the fire of activism in you? And if so, what was it and how did it impact you?
There's so many. Because there's so many things, different things that I do that were impacted. So one, being homeless, having experienced homelessness in my life. That's why I ended up making homelessness the central focus of my my work as a social worker. I was just like, nobody should have to ever go through this. And so having experienced that, when I was young, my mom was a big HIV/AIDS activist and queer activist. And so I grew up and the first time I experienced someone dying was my mom's best friend, and he passed away from AIDS. And then we were in a church where our pastor revealed that he was HIV positive through a transfusion. And we came back the next week and half the church was gone. And that really kind of lit a fire under me. And I was young, I was a kid, but I was like, this is not right. Like, people should not, what is happening here? Then I went to a predominantly white high school with people whose last names were on products that were in my house. And I was just like, what is this? I was poor and I didn't understand that. But I tell people all the time, I think I got radicalized in high school just by being one of a handful of Black people. You really become conscious of the world around you. And I'd say finally getting to undergrad, and I was in undergrad when we were fighting for affirmative action. That's many moons ago. So, that I think that was the first major protest I helped organize. So that was, that definitely got me involved. And I think just over time, just when you really become conscious of what's going on in the world around you, you just, oh gosh, there's so much material to pull from. You wish there wasn't, but there is. So I would think those are major things I think that really got me on this path.
Thank you for that beautiful response. I'm going to take the next question. Who were some women who influenced your activism? I think you talked a little bit about this, but you can go more. What is it about these women that inspire you?
I always got to say my mom first. My mom was an activist, and she was the kind of person that would literally give her jacket off her back to somebody on the street, and I watched her do it, so I know that she was that kind of person. When my mother died, so many people came to the funeral that I'd never met before or anything, but they all had things to say about her feeding them and fighting for them and things like that. So I kind of grew up with this mom who was really about, fighting for the greater good. I think of people like Anna Julia Cooper, who, over 100 years ago was out there, writing and talking about intersectionality and challenging Du Bois to be more gender inclusive, but she was also a Pan-Africanist and, just kind of fighting against everything. I think of all those women, Sadie Alexander, all those who had to fight against all of the academic nonsense just to be able to tell their truths. Amy Jacques Garvey, Marcus Garvey's wife, was one of the first people to write about, listen, stop waiting around for these men. You women got to do it yourself kind of stuff. Angela Davis, for sure. I hate that a lot of people try to erase her queer identity. That's wild to me. Dorothy Pittman Hughes, I actually just wrote an article about her. She recently passed away. And people know Gloria Steinem, but they don't know Dorothy. And there's no Gloria Steinem without Dorothy Pittman Hughes. So I think of people like that. These are all women who kind of look around and they're like, this stuff is messed up. We got to write about it. We got to talk about it. We got to do something about it. And that's kind of how I feel. So I'm inspired by women who move through the world like that.
Right. Thank you, Ms. Jones. I have the next question. All right. Dr. King once said, quote, "We must use time creatively in the knowledge that the time is always right to do right," unquote. That was many years ago. Yet recently at Ebenezer Baptist Church, where her father once preached, his daughter, the Reverend Bernice King, said, quote, "She's exhausted, exasperated, and frankly, disappointed to hear her father's words about justice quoted so extensively alongside so little progress addressing society's greatest problems." So in your view, what are the biggest misconceptions lawmakers and politicians perpetuate to twist Dr. King's legacy for equal rights for all Americans? And secondly, what suggestions do you have for how to respond to the call for action to work together for equality for all Americans?
Well, for the first question, they act like they like him. That's the biggest misconception. They don't like that man. They never liked him. They hated him. Like I am always tickled. And when the FBI and the CIA post on Dr. King's Day, I'm like, are you kidding me? You killed him. Like, you hate this man. Like, what are you talking about? I think that that's why they extract these quotations that don't really push much, right? They're not talking about the rebellion, the revolt, the protest, the rioting, and all those things that he talked about. That they're not saying, the point where he said, "I fear I've integrated my people into a burning house." They're not going to bring that up, right? Because they want to, like I said earlier, kind of deny him that power and that influence that they had. The misconception that he was colorblind, a lot of people talk about him in the context of being colorblind. That man was not colorblind. That man knew who he was and he knew exactly what we were facing. They kind of paint him as this dreamer. Dr. King was a doer. Like, this was a man who was involved in many organizations. He was on many boards. He wasn't just going around giving speeches. He was, contributing his scholarly expertise. I mean, the man was brilliant. He was contributing his scholarly expertise. And that's another thing that they play down, is just how smart Dr. King, like, he was a genius. Like, and they really downplay just how much of an intellectual he was. And then they also, one of their misconception, again, as I mentioned, is that Dr. King was a radical, and they don't ever talk about him in the radical sense. They used to call him everything terrorist, enemy number one, but these days they don't really talk about Dr. King being as radical. As to your second question, how do we respond for calls to actions to work together? That's a tough one. And I think it's something that I think about a lot. I'd say 2015, I wrote an essay by way of a Twitter thread where I said that allies don't exist. And people have run with this and they teach it now in colleges and stuff like that. Because I basically made the case that allyship is about a mutual benefit, like two people, two entities coming together for a mutual benefit. But when white and Black people are coming together, for example, to fight for Black liberation, there's no mutual benefit for white people. There's no There's no benefit for, a white person to have a Black person be liberated. I mean, there are some benefits, but it's not mutual. It's not equal. It's not anything on par. And I think that when we talk about allyship and things like that, it's always extractive. It's always kind of, I'll show up until I can't anymore. And the people who are living under oppression can't choose to opt out, right? There's constantly a fight. So I think the response is always, for me, to remind people that this is not something that you just kind of dip in and out when it's convenient or when you need to collect, community service hours or something. This is a way of being. This is who we are. This is how we live. And you're either committed to this as a co-conspirator or an accomplice, or you don't have to be involved. We'll find the people that are really committed to this. And that's an uncomfortable conversation. A lot of people are not really comfortable with this idea that you're challenging them to commit their lives to this.
Wow. To the fourth question, at least 24 states have banned critical race theory or introduced legislation to ban it for being taught in classrooms, with many calling it divisive and anti-American. Conversely, advocates for the teaching of critical race theory in the classroom maintain that a ban is an attempt to downplay or erase Americans' history of racial violence. What do you make of this current debate?
I am probably the most sardonic person when it comes to this. Every time they bring up CRT, I want to ask them, name 3 critical race theorists. They can't. They don't know what they're talking about, right? And so this is definitely about ignorance, but it's also about our literacy problems, right? And I've really been focused on this lately because it's becoming so apparent that so many of the issues we're having in our country is because people can't read, and they can't read for comprehension. And so they believe anything that they see online or hear on the news or whatever podcast, because they're lacking the skills to actually be able to read for themselves and investigate. And that's dangerous for a society. The economists have been writing about the negative impact that literacy is going to have. And so we're not taking this seriously enough. We're seeing it happen politically. And quite frankly, we're letting it happen because there's no way Ron DeSantis should have been able to stand up there in any podium and say this and actually be able to finish his sentences. We let him. We let him sign those papers. We let him, threat to charge people with felonies. And all we're doing is talking about it on Twitter. Nobody has stopped them. And we can stop them. We see countries throughout history, the people, when they don't like something, they stop people from doing things, right? When they realize that things are wrong, they stop them. We don't. And that's why I say that we're all kind of complicit in this. Now, somebody who does actually teach critical race theory in college, where it belongs, I think the whole thing is just a dog whistle. It's a racist dog whistle. They're always looking for new phrases for the N-word because they're not allowed to say it. They're still mad that they can't say it. So they come up with things like CRT and woke and whatever else they can come up with to call us the N-word without calling us the N-word. None of them, so many of the people who talk about this have never stepped foot in a college class. So that's also fascinating, right? I'm sorry, people don't know what they're talking about. So it's really hard to weigh in without my utter frustration and this like cynicism that I have, because I'm just like, y'all can't read. So why are we even talking about this? So that's my thought on it. I wish I had more to say about it, but that's what I got.
Thank you for that. All right, here we go. Next question about the Supreme Court. Historically, disenfranchised citizens have fought tirelessly for equal voting rights, for marriage equality, reproductive rights, and affirmative action, to name a few. Some of these fundamental rights have already been restricted by the current Supreme Court. What steps can we as citizens take to counteract the actual and potential reversal of these fundamental rights by the High Court?
Nothing. You want to know why? They've been appointed in an archaic, disgusting manner that nobody should have a lifetime appointment for any position anywhere ever. That is tyranny, that is fascism. No Supreme Court justice should ever have a lifetime appointment. The architects of the Constitution and the so-called forefathers did not imagine that either. So the fact that we have a system right now where somebody gets appointed and it's a lifetime position is wrong. So now we've got all these younger people who have been given lifetime appointments. They're going to be there for the next 20, 30, 40 years. It's not happening in our generation, right? So how do we deal with the fallout of that? We have to organize and become revolutionaries. We have to, when you think about things like abortions, right? All right, people are still going to have abortions. That's a fact. They can try to restrict it, doesn't matter. People have been having abortions since people could have babies. So they're going to find ways. So I think what's going to happen is we're going to see more underground networks, coming up that are going to help facilitate that. More doctors are going to go rogue. We're going to have the back alley clinics, but now we're in 2023, so that we actually have the machines and the things that we need. That's still going to happen. We're going to get abortion pills to people that need them. Like we're going to counteract it on the grassroots level. Some of the other stuff that is happening, it's like you could say, oh, well, go vote, but the president already put these people, the former president already put these people in office, unless they pass away or they resign or what have you. I mean, you could try to shame them into resigning or try to force them into resigning, but that, I think it speaks to the work that we have to do to change how America is structured. Right? We have these three branches, and do they make sense now? Are they still relevant today? This executive branch, do we need to have this Supreme Court? I actually one of those people who thinks we do not need a Supreme Court. We need to look at how the laws and how things are legislated on the local levels, and what does it take to change that? Is that something you could vote for? Can you vote for your judges? Have you voted for a local judge? You can think about those things before they even get up to that space. But I think that we're actually kind of in a place where we're stuck, and we're going to be living reactively. And I think that human beings always will survive. They will always find ways to do the things that they need to do. So I think we're going to be okay in that regard.
All right. What advice and counsel do you recommend for this current generations of activists?
Kind of some of the stuff that I was saying earlier, one, you got to make sure you have a purpose. A lot of students will ask me, a lot of young people will say, well, how do I find my purpose? And I tell them it's the thing that you think about every day, and you may not understand why you think about it every day. That's what your purpose is. Do research, make sure you're not trying to reinvent the wheel. There's so many people out there doing really great work. You don't have to actually take on something for yourself. You can actually just join up with people that are already doing things. You want to build community. You can't do this by yourself. A lot of people, unfortunately, want to showboat or because they want credit or things like that. This is not about getting accolades or awards or money or anything like that. This is about building community and working together to make the world a better place. So find your people, find your tribe, and share the responsibilities. Don't try to do everything yourself. And then the final thing is understand that there's life outside of social media. Social media can be a valuable tool for things, but you have to know how to exist and how to organize and how to function outside of social media. You cannot rely on it anymore. It's getting really scary. You see what's happening with Twitter, the threats from TikTok and all this stuff like that. You can't rely on social media anymore.
Thank you. More on a personal level, which of your achievements are you most proud of?
That I've raised a really compassionate young man who is really smart, and he loves history, and he challenges his teachers when they try to teach him nonsense. My kid is amazing. And it's so weird because people be like, they'll list all these other things. None of that stuff matters to me. Like every time somebody reads my bio, I'm like, oh, none of that stuff matters to me. It's just stuff that I do. But the fact that in this day and age that I've raised a young Black man to be compassionate and loving and caring and, have feminist leanings and be, empathetic and be really socially conscious and culturally conscious is probably the thing I'm most proud of. And he's just such a sweetheart. He gets on my nerves because he's 16 and he eats everything, but I just keep feeding him. I don't care. He's great. And I think that's the thing I'm most proud of is because I never wanted to have kids. So the fact that I managed to figure this out is kind of awesome.
Okay, for our last question, do you have any future projects coming out?
I'm sure I do now. I am currently dissertating. So I'm writing this, working on this dissertation. I'm very much interested in representations of African motherhood in cinema, and I'm specifically looking at 90s hip hop cinema. And I really, this whole thing with the Woman King is having me think like, nah, maybe I gotta change it up a little bit. I don't know, the way that the Woman King was totally erased. 2 years ago, I founded an online virtual academy called the Sankofa Summer School. It's an Afrocentric school. We are going into our 3rd year, and we will be in person for some of the classes this year. So I'm very excited about that. The fact that I was actually able to start like a school was pretty awesome. And I'm looking forward to scaling that up. And I'm currently working on my 5th book proposal because, you got to propose it and all that good stuff. So hopefully I have another book coming out in the next couple of years or so, once I get this dissertation done. So those are things that I'm thinking about right now. I'm just dissertating. I'm just writing.
Right, that's great. So I'm gonna move on at this time to the gift presentation. So on behalf of Chancellor Fuller, the faculty, staff, and students of the University of Massachusetts Dartmouth, would like to present to you with this token of appreciation for sharing your keynote address with us and as a community. Thank you so much.
That was for me. I was like, I love it. Thank you. I'm so honored. Y'all are so cool. Thank you so much for having me. This is great.
Thank you again, Ms. Jones. And in closing, I'd like to take this opportunity to thank everyone in attendance for your support of today's 21st annual Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. virtual breakfast celebration. Special thank you to Chancellor Fuller, members of his cabinet and staff, the deans of the various colleges, the Office of the Provost, the Office of Human Resources, the Office of Student Affairs, and to the UMass Dartmouth community for your unwavering support for this event. To our keynote speaker, Feminista Jones, it's been truly a pleasure meeting you today. While the pandemic has required us to think creatively outside of the box in terms of programming, COVID-19 failed to diminish the enthusiasm for this event, as over hundreds of people were in attendance this morning. We attribute that result to the impact of your inspirational message and story. Thank you again for visiting UMass Dartmouth. I'd like to also thank Shane Burgo, our very own D. Sward Gospel Choir and unique sound band for their amazing musical performances. To F.A. Obo Adahosa, thank you for serving as my co-host for this year's celebration. This event could not have been possible without the tireless efforts of the 2023 Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Virtual Breakfast Planning Committee. Kudos to Peggy Dias, Executive Director, IT Services, Diane Gomes, IT Communications Coordinator, Patricia Freitas, Executive Director to the Office of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion, and the members of the Black History Four Seasons Council, who ensured that each and every detail for this program were taken care of. Special thanks to Greg Peculian and Scott Lynch from the Department of Computer and Information Technology Services for their logistical and technical support. Thank you to Ryan Merrill and Sophia Love in the Office of the Chancellor for your assistance, coordination, and support of the university's executive leadership for participation at today's event. To our colleagues in university marketing, special thank you to Mary Avery, Kevin Diakwa, Chelsea Pusa, and Heather Tripp for your extraordinary efforts in promoting and marketing this event to the campus and to the community at large. And last, but certainly not least, to the members of the local community. Please know that we truly appreciate each and every one of you for being with us today and sharing in this event with the UMass Dartmouth community. It's our hope that you truly enjoyed today's program, especially our keynote speaker, Feminista Jones, and our very own Chancellor Fuller for their inspirational remarks. We all know that there is continued work to be done. We hope that each of you leaves here today encouraged to accept Dr. King's call to action and to make strides to create a world where one's race, gender, ethnicity, religious or political belief, education, socioeconomic background, sexual orientation, or disability do not serve as deterrents or hindrances from being free, productive, and contributing members of society. To close our program, I'd like to invite Shane Virgil back to perform I Know Where I've Been, a song written by Mark Scheinman and Scott Whitman.
There's a light in the darkness, though the night is black as our skin. There's a light burning bright, showing me the way. But I know where I've been. There's a cry in the distance, yeah. There's a voice that comes from deep within. There's a cry asking why. I pray the answer's up ahead, 'cause I know where I've been. There's a road we've been traveling, lost so many on the way, but the riches will be plenty. What the price we had to pay. There's a dream in the future. There's a struggle that we have yet to win. And there's pride in my heart, 'cause I know where I'm going. Yes, I do. And I know where I've been. There is a road we must travel. There is a promise we must make. Oh, but the riches will be plenty, yeah, worth the risk and the chance to take. There's a dream, yeah. In the future, there's a struggle that we have yet to win. Use that pride in our hearts to lift us up until tomorrow. 'Cause just to sit still would be a sin. Lord knows that I know where I've been. Yeah, I'll give thanks to my God, 'cause I know where I've been.
Thank you, Shane. In closing, we'd like to thank you all for your support and participation this morning. It's our hope that next year, we'll be bringing the 22nd annual Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Breakfast back to campus, where we can fellowship with each other over a full breakfast. Keep your fingers crossed for that waffle bar. I'd like to remind you that UMass Dartmouth celebrates Black History all year long, not just during the month of February. I invite you to visit the Black History Four Seasons website at www.umassd.edu/Black History for additional programming throughout the year. As you depart today, I encourage you to reflect on the legacy of Dr. King and remember that together we can be the dream. Be well and stay safe and enjoy the rest of your day.